Hello everybody, this is Serf. We're here. It's the big one. If you weren't aware, if you haven't been paying attention to the Discords, a few days ago, about a week ago, maybe a little bit more, the biggest war to ever take place in the history of maybe all of Minecraft. All of Minecraft world building took place between Bardonia and Coalition forces. The biggest war to date. We're going to get right on it. I'm going to give you the whole rundown. I'm going to give you a timeline. I'm going to give you my thoughts. It's going to be crazy, so stay tuned and we're going to get you. Before we hop right on in, I'd like to sort of address mic quality for now and maybe the next several videos until I really invest in getting it fixed. But I just moved into my new college house and it's kind of bare at the moment, so there's a lot of echoing going on in the walls. I don't know if you've noticed the sound quality as of late. Still the same mic, still the same setup, just the sound is bouncing off the walls a little bit more than it was at my house back at home. So before you ask any questions there. Now, like any good Surf's World video, we got 3 parts for you. Count them 3. First, setting the scene. 2, the fall of Bardonia. And 3, living with the consequences. In setting the scene, we're going to be talking about the Bardonian hegemony, sort of in Rathnir, the Dandelion War, the previous Coalition Wars, the history of the sort of Allium Alliance and the Trillium Alliance before that, Coalition history, and the declarations at the very beginning of the war. Second section will cover the fall of Bardonia and the Allium Alliance as a whole, the mustering of the forces, the Battle of New Rock and the Pillars of the Sun, and the Bardonian Spring. Lastly, in Living with the Consequences, the sort of fallout of the Bardonian Spring, the Treaty of New Rock, and how the Coalition is faring thus far, at least at the recording of this video, which is August 6th, 2021. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I thought it would be a cool idea to give you the macro of the situation before we zoom in on the micro. And I'd like to do that by giving a sort of half-comprehensive timeline of events. And I chose to do events that had to do strictly with the war in and of itself. There were other conflicts going on in and around the same time as the Third-Allium Coalition War. Conflicts like the Deliria and you know what I'm talking about. The
Deliria and Demi conflict.
If I mispronounced you, I don't speak Polish. I think that's what that sounds like, but there you go. Starting with the timeline. So as a little key before we start the timeline, it wasn't very clear to me, and there aren't really a whole lot of lists that you can find out there of when people are entering and leaving alliances all at once. There's no log for that. So when someone decides to back Bardonia or back the Coalition, it's hard to tell if they were already in the Allium Alliance or the Coalition to begin with. So I decided to push that to the wayside altogether. If your nation endorsed the Coalition on our national announcements, Rathnir national announcements, I said they declared war on Bardonia. And if you were with the Allium Alliance, I said that you back Bardonia. You've got their back, that you back them up. The conflict begins at 6:01, July 26th, 2021, with Lennox and Ryzan declaring independence from Bardonia, beginning the Bardonian Spring. At 6:03, Viadoxa, Alamein, and Alderash declare war on Bardonia. At 6:04, Tortuga declares war on Bardonia. At 6:11, Magisterium declares neutrality. At 6:11, Baconia declares war on Bardonia. At 6:12, the Admiralty of Greenland declares neutrality. At 6:19, Vale declares war on Bardonia. At 6:38, Eisenland declares neutrality. At 6:56, Plagatia declares neutrality. At 7:06, Arxelia backs Bardonia. At 7:11, Asharia backs Bardonia. At 7:13, Yimu Adal declares neutrality. At 7:28, Cobbleworks, Saronia, Vanakunir, Konia, Shirakaba, Kush, and the councils jointly declare war on Bardonia as the Aldovir League. At 7:31, Plagatia renounces neutrality and declares war on Bardonia. Also, Vilanda backs Bardonia. At 7:41, the Acolytes declare war on Bardonia. At 7:47, That ends the first day of July 26th. Now moving on to July 27th, starting with, of course, Volanda backing down. At 1:17, the anti-Bardonian rebels take Astoria. At 2 a.m., Helga declares independence from Bardonia. At 5:06 a.m., Simulami declares war on Bardonia. At 2:53 p.m., Northton announces neutrality. At 2:59, Varelia declares war on Bardonia. At 5:26, Vandakunir declares war on Bardonia. At 6:52, Bardonian leadership calls for New Darastarok to be abandoned, leaving only a skeleton crew. At 7:02, Yimu Aldal declares war on Bardonia. At 7:08, Andorn declares independence from Bardonia. In 7:11, the Pillars of the Sun is attacked by coalition forces while neutral. It's a Bardonian victory. 7:47, the Battle of New Darastarok is won by coalition forces. At 8:51, Asharia and Huitka make a joint statement leaving the Allium Alliance. Also, Frostmere leaves the Allium Alliance. At 9:36, Sinatra Mafia leaves the Allium Alliance. At 9:42, Ardat declares independence from Bardonia. At 10:33, Bardonian pretenders seek to hold the line against coalition forces. At 10:34, Baranov declares independence from Bardonia. At 11:33, rogue Bardonian Navy officials take control of Ostland and declare independence. This is the end of July 27th. From here, things start to get a little bit more spaced out. At 2:18 a.m. on the 28th, Auroran's Peak declares independence from Bardonia. At 10:30, Astoria declares independence from Bardonia and joins Yimu Aldal. At 11:41, the town of Schwarzfeld declares independence from Bardonia. At 12:51 p.m., Avaria declares independence from Viadoxa. At 1:39, Rabarnia declares independence from Bardonia. At 2:10, the Barbarossan pirates from Eldham come to Rathnir and claim northern Ryzan. In 2:23, Baragomir declares independence from Viadoxa. At 4:03 p.m., volunteer coalition forces back Ryzan against Barbarossa. At 5:08, Barbarossa renounces its claim in northern Ryzan. In 8:08, Marmor declares independence from Bardonia. That is the end of the 28th of July. At 1:15 a.m. on the 29th, Coalition and Bardonia enter peace talks. The next day, the 30th, at 6:26 p.m., Coalition and Bardonian peace talks ends with the Treaty of New Darastarok, formally ending the war. At 7:13 on the 30th, Coalition does not respect the claims of Rabarnia and Schwarzfeld in the core Bardonian land. At 2:53 on August 2nd, Auroran's Peak is given to the Magisterium. And finally, also on the 2nd, at 10:32 a.m., New Darastarok becomes part of the Magisterium. So now with that very quick, fast-paced macro view of the most recent war out of the way, we can delve a little bit deeper, see the rise of these nations, particularly Bardonia, and how their rapid expansion facilitated the war that ended in their collapse. This is called the Dandelion War, also called the Bardonian Wars, and this is sort of how they took massive amounts of territory in a short period of time. Give it about 6 months or so. So the Dandelion War came right off the back of the first Coalition War, which was January 1st through 9th, 2021. And this one was a Bardonian victory. They defeated the Coalition, and with this came a massive boost to morale for the Bardonians and their allies. After this is when the Dandelion Wars really began, with a Bardonian mobilization and the Chancellor of Bardonia at the time announcing his ambition to unify all of Rathnir under a single banner. So he's looking for world domination here, nothing short of complete annexation of absolutely everything. And this, in my opinion, is where the toxicity that has existed within the Wars of Rathnir really started, with absolutely everyone on Rathnir being threatened by Bardonia for their ambition to absolutely conquer them all. And so you can start to see where it's all coming from. This doesn't excuse any toxicity from the player base, of course. I'm just trying to give a little context on why people might feel strongly against Bardonia. So there's that. So according to the Dandelion War wiki page, the Dandelion War took place from January 14th to January 20th, and during this time, to sort of alleviate some tensions, Bardonia started doing a tactic which I have ended up mentioning before. In a previous video, I mentioned how there was a coup in Batu on Eldham in which the Bardonians took over that particular nation. However, if you look at the leadership of Batu and the leadership of the post-coup Batu, known as ETC, the Eldham Trade Company, no one really changed. The leadership of the nation did not change whatsoever. They faked a coup. And in the Dandelion War, about 6 months prior, they did something very similar. There's a whole section devoted to this on the wiki called the Fake Civil War, in which they made people think, they manufactured false instability within their nation to justify further consolidation and further reform in their favor. But like I said, since January, there has been this massive rivalry between Bardonia and its allies and basically everyone else. The first coalition war, the one that happened a couple days ago, was the third one. The second one, I do not believe has a wiki. I don't know what happened there. But if you want the history of your deeds to be known, write wikis about it. Please write wikis about it. If it's relevant, someone will talk about it in a video. If you want it to be remembered, please write it down. No one's going through the Discord. No one's going through the Discord archives of the Stoneworks Discord trying to find every announcement you made. It is so much easier if you just make a wiki about it, trust me, folks. So like I said, we just had the third one. The second one is unknown to me right now, at least, and the first one happened all the way back in January. Similar teams, not exactly the same teams, nations rise and fall, but the major powers have stayed pretty much the same since then. The first one was a Bardonian victory. It's called the Great Rathnir War. This one might be the even bigger, mainly because back in January, at least back when I was playing, the player cap, there was no Eldham, and the player cap was 90, and now it's 200 on Rathnir, so this one, it was like double the size of the first Great Rathnir War. Absolutely crazy. It ended with the Battle of Urnu Arak, which included between 80 and 100 people according to the wiki, an event so big that the server was whitelisted, I'm quoting right now, for pre-registered members for the battle only. That's absolutely massive. And the one we just had was even bigger. It really was the biggest Minecraft battle to ever happen in the history of Minecraft world building. It was absolutely crazy. So the way I see it, and just looking at the timeline I made, the Bardonian Spring happens in two parts. The first with the Declaration of Independence from Linux and Ryzan. With that, coalition forces have the justification they need to not only guarantee the independence of these two new nations, but also press their claims on Bardonia for attempting to settle their own revolt. Now that we're in the war proper, the first sort of armed conflict, the first in-your-face, people-dying conflict, took place in the far northern bit of Bardonian land in a province called Astoria. Here, under Bardonian occupation after their declaration of independence, the pro-independence forces were able to successfully drive out pro-Bardonian forces and secure their independence, once through diplomacy and the second through force of arms. After this, there were two battles that happened near simultaneously, that being the Battle of the Pillars of the Sun and the Battle of New Darastarak. Since these happened at sort of the same time. I'll start with the Battle of the Pillars of the Sun. Now, the Pillars of the Sun were neutral. They announced neutrality. However, a lot of Bardonian forces were taking refuge there, and the coalition thought it would be a great idea to distract the pro-Bardonian forces with a diversionary tactic at that battle. This was pretty universally denounced by everyone not really gung-ho for the coalition. They were neutral, but the coalition saw strategic value in attacking nonetheless. This was a pretty big coalition defeat, the Bardonian forces winning pretty single-handedly. However, it did have the intended effect of keeping Bardonian forces away from New Darastarok, the capital of Bardonia, when they would have been of best use there. However, this was not to be for long anyway, as the defenders of the Pillars of the Sun pulled out, leaving it to be looted and sacked by coalition forces. Though the defense was successful, the choice to leave the Pillars of the Sun did result in the coalition occupation. However, before coalition forces could make it to New Darastarok, the leader of Bardonia, Crazy Man, ordered a general retreat out of their capital of New Darastarok. Meanwhile, coalition forces were rallying in the city of Carthia in the newly independent Ryzan. They had agreed to split up into two divisions, one consisting of 70 players and the other consisting of about 25 players, according to the wiki. And they intended to pincer maneuver on the Bardonian capital and take it from two sides. With the general retreat order having gone out, the coalition forces only met with a skeleton crew of Bardonian zealots, I guess you could say, who decided to make it their last stand against coalition forces. It goes without saying that the coalition forces won this one pretty handily, sacking the Bardonian capital. With this big announcement that the Bardonian capital had fallen, it produced a much greater wave of resentment against Bardonia, now that the entire server and everyone who did not like Bardonia saw weakness and blood in the water and decided to pounce, taking advantage of it completely. And after, or really even before that, when Bardonian leadership calls for New Darastarok to be abandoned, it all just sort of crumbles. Yumu Aldal joins the war on the coalition side. Andorn declares independence. Asharia and Whitka leave Bardonia's alliance. So does Frostmere and the Sinatra Mafia, which is pretty much everyone. Then Ardat declares independence, and Baranov declares independence. It's crazy. It gets so weird that Bardonian naval officials coup a country. Well, they take over a sort of province. It's called Ostland. It's up in the north. It's sort of beside. It's above, just above Linux, and a bit to the left of, or it's a bit to the right of Andorn. And that's so weird, you know? Like, that's some post-World War I Freikorps stuff, you know? That's crazy. I was entertained when I read that announcement. Absolutely wild. With the announcement that New Darastarok had fallen, Bardonia, and after all their allies leave, Bardonia concedes defeat, and Bardonia and the rest of the coalition forces begin to discuss peace talks. And that takes a long time. It takes a while. It takes over a day for them to hash out the entire treaty. And this is where we enter our third and final category here, living with the consequences, beginning with the Bardonian Empire continuing to receive independence movements from absolutely everywhere, and the drafting and the signing of the Treaty of New Darastarok. So with the acceptance of the Treaty of New Darastarok, it completely changed the way Bardonia was run. It changed Bardonia from an empire to a republic, completely abolishing their previous government. They also had to acknowledged the independence of all of the places outside of core Bardonia that had declared independence in the Bardonian Spring. With the rise of the Republic in Bardonia, the treaty stipulated that it would be run by 5 members, and it dictated those members within the wiki. It also gave a list of players who could never hold office again in Bardonia. On top of that, Bardonia is absolutely forbidden from annexing any territory for 2 weeks after the treaty was signed. However, it does give them the right to clear out any squatters that are on the land. And in the event that the Bardonian government that's been set up by the coalition completely collapses, the coalition reserves the right to swoop in there and physically set it right through force of arms. However, that's just not the end. That's not how it's settled just yet. With Bardonia dismantled, it leaves only the coalition standing, but the coalition isn't receiving that massive boost of morale that the Bardonians experienced after their victory in the first coalition war. In fact, it seems like it's the opposite. Soon after the peace treaty was signed, many coalition nations announced their resignation. They announced their withdrawal from the coalition altogether. Namely, Tortuga, who said that they were not being listened to by the other coalition members and have just decided to leave. Also leaving the coalition was Baconia, who fundamentally disagreed with what the coalition was doing and sided with them for the purposes of their self-interest and independence. As well as not only them, but the United Commonwealth, who was disgusted by the allowance of the coalition for Bardonia and Ryzan to form a union. However, I'm just looking at this in the present, and the situation will continue to unfold, and the long-term consequences haven't even begun to set in yet. So we'll see how it goes. But this is all the information I have for you today. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what you think. Subscribe to the video if you like Stoneworks content. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, favorite. And next time, I'll be talking to you about spies and spy networks to get your sort of espionage program for your nation up and going. So get hype. Get hype, everybody.